too long after that I believe he got involved.
Right. Well, so the other thing that I was thinking about here, Frank, was we referenced the kid from Ohio that grows up with a pony at 5 years old, and ultimately, I mean, there's a cowboy blood runs through your veins, and here you are running through in 1979, driving a semi truck in Baja. There weren't very many other people in the world that were better suited to do what you were doing. I'm sure there were, but how fitting is it that this kid from Ohio who's a cowboy, even as a kid, is now living out this what would ultimately be a modern cowboy dream, driving a semi-truck through the Baja Peninsula, enjoying and recognizing as a 21-year-old that it's beautiful and a wonderful place.
Oh, yeah. You know, I couldn't believe that they were paying me to be there and to go on that adventure. And you know, it was an adventure. A lot of people, you know, throughout the years when they first go to Baja or Mexico, they're not comfortable for whatever reason. Maybe I wasn't smart enough to be uncomfortable, but I felt like it was a second home, you know. I love the wide open spaces, the change in the scenery, the people that I met along the way, and probably most of all, the simple life.
Yeah,
you know, it was pretty awesome. You know, and as I was saying, you know, we get to San Ignacio, and San Ignacio is halfway down the peninsula, but it's like an oasis. So we're traveling through the desert and seeing all this different change and cactus and rocks and so forth. And then you get to San Ignacio, and it's like a little oasis with palm trees and water and just unbelievable.
Yeah, it's like you've just been teleported into a tropical island or something. It's an amazing place. For those of you that have not traveled down the peninsula by car, the juxtaposition of just rugged desert to turning a corner and pulling into this oasis that is massive date palms and a beautiful river that runs through the town. It really is a big contrast.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing, and not only the beauty and, you know, thinking you're in the tropics, but then you know, we spent probably 4 or 5 days there, a couple of days waiting for the race to come to us, and then as the race passed through there, and then leaving. And so we had some time to meet a lot of people and a lot of the locals and learn some of the history. And the history in San Ignacio is unbelievable. You know, it has one of the missions from I think it was the late 1700s, early 1800s, that's still operational today, right in the middle of town. There's a lot of old historic buildings. It's still even today, it's still kind of a quaint little town that's in an oasis that you wouldn't think was part of Baja.
Well, I think that's something that is unique, and I have to stop myself from trying to make Baja sound like it's the only place in the world like this, because I certainly haven't traveled enough to make that statement. But it's unique in the sense that it's this thin peninsula that has bodies of water on both ends, a massive mountain range that runs through the middle of it, and all kinds of different topography. I mean, there's species of plant and cactus that only exist on that peninsula, the Boojum cactus being one of them, and the Cardone as well. And mountains that have snow in them, which I bet you right now, with all the storms that have just come through here in Southern California, I'm willing to believe that the San Pedro Martires are absolutely full of snow right now, which that blows people away sometimes when you talk about Baja being a place where there's actually mountains and snow. Most people envision Baja being this desert, and it's really so much more than that. But, you know, you mentioned spending time in San Ignacio and meeting the people. And I told you this right before I pressed record here, that I finished up lunch with an acquaintance that I met 10 years ago during my stint of living in Baja and working for a company, Wide Open Adventures. And I kind of wanted to steer this conversation that direction. Both of us have been very fortunate to have spent quite a bit of time in this wonderful place we call Baja. And yeah, I have the stories of adventure like you do, but I also have, and I believe you've probably got more just because you're older and been around longer, and that's said with honor, not with disdain or any other thing. But the people that we have been privileged to meet and ultimately call friends. And I just thought, there's obviously you've again, those of you that are listening that know who Frank is. Yep, Frank has made friends with and had relationships with some very iconic people in motorsports, and that's awesome. But I want to ask you about the ones that are less known, and I believe there has to be some. And I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, and we don't necessarily. It's not like we need the names, but tell me about that part of life for you, because I have some amazing friends in Baja that I don't have to see very often, that there's just a connection with. Some of them are Mexican, some of them are Canadian, some of them are French. But to me, that's one of the really neat things about my life and the time that I've spent there, is that because of the ruggedness, because of what it is, it draws a certain particular type of person. And you can be from Ohio, you can be from Quebec, you can be from Spain, but if you find yourself in the middle of the peninsula, chances are there's something that I have in common with you, and in some ways I think that's what you and I have in common.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think I've ever met anyone in Baja that I didn't care for. And like you mentioned, Ryan, there's people that have moved down there. There's people that are traveling down there that you meet. I've met some really unique characters that were just passing through Baja over the years, a couple of which I still stay in contact with today. But also a lot of locals that I've met when I first started going down there in 79 and 80 and 81, that, like you say, we don't maybe stay in touch on a regular basis. They only see one another once every 2 or 3 years. But it's always good to run into them and take some time to catch up and see what's going on in their life. There's some that I've met that we do stay in touch. About every 2 or 3 months, I'll get a Facebook message from them, or a text message, or I'll send the same to them. And it seems like when you meet good friends in Baja, they're friends for life. I don't know how to explain it, but I almost feel like Baja is my second home. I've been blessed to be able to spend quite a bit of time in Baja, both for racing, but then after the races, vacationing and traveling along. And I've spent some holidays with some Mexican families, doing Thanksgiving and special holidays and get-togethers with some of them. And it's really an honor to be able to spend time with them and enjoy their country and their hospitality. I probably learn every time I go down there from the people, from where I go, from who I visit. I've been, as we talked, I've been going down there for 41 years. And you would think after 41 years, you would have thought you've seen it all.
Yeah, it's not a huge place. I mean, 1,000 miles long and maybe 100 miles across at its widest point. And that's a guess there. That's not factual, but yeah, it's not a huge place. So I like you would think, yeah, we would have seen the majority of it, but there's still so much to explore as far as I'm concerned.
Oh yeah. I think one day when I retire, I'd still like to spend a year or two exploring. You know, in 2000, Sal Fish and Score put on the Baja 2000, and that was a 2,000-mile race was the goal, and the only way to find 2,000 miles down the peninsula was to zigzag back and forth across the peninsula all the way down to the bottom. And so, you know, one of my jobs had always been to help Score find the race courses. So that year I spent probably close to 3 months off and on trying to find new race course for us to run with for the Baja 2000. And we would go down and we'd run in areas that I'd never ran before. We'd go through them, we'd come back, supply that information to the government to see if we could go through there. In some cases we'd be allowed to, in other cases they'd say, no, you can't go to that area, that's a sensitive area or what have you. But during that year of trying to find all these new roads, I went through areas I had never been before and have never been since. And when I retire and go down to explore and spend more time, I want to go back to those areas and do more exploring in some of those areas, because they're not in areas that we normally travel.
Well, so that's a good segue into a couple of different veins that I'd like to go with you, and one of them is just there's those of you that are listening that have spent time down there. There are the normal routes and the normal places to sleep, and so often people plan trips based around, you know, a hotel, you know, a chain of hotels, and clearly that was originally the Presidente or the La Pinta chain of hotels. There's a lot more of those different types of hotels today, but when you were doing that kind of stuff with Sal, and I don't know, maybe you're going to surprise me and tell me you did always sleep in a hotel, but were you sleeping in the dirt much?
Well, you know, it was pretty amazing in that, you know, there would be a few nights, yes, we'd be camping out, but we found a lot of, I'm going to say hotels, but they're not hotels as most people would think of them.
No, yeah.
You know, it might have a roof over your head, in a couple instances, a blanket over the door, a bed in the room.
Or several beds in the room.
Yeah, exactly. There were ranches along the way that would rent rooms. You know, there's still several of those today. And actually those places are pretty cool because they've fixed them up to where, you know, you've got all the creature comforts that you would need. But what's fun is it's still very, very basic. And so you may find one of these places where you can go for $50 a night, and that's going to include not only your room and bed, but also dinner that night and breakfast. The only thing is dinner and breakfast might be a surprise. In other words, you pay your fee and you get what they're serving everybody else at the table. So it's always great food, but you might not know what it's going to be until it's served.
So let's go back to some of these places that you would like to explore once you officially retire. I mean, there's areas that, and I don't know. I mean, it would be interesting to. I mean, you and I have never done this. Looked at a map and compared where each of us has been. I was very fortunate to get to spend a lot of time on the peninsula. Not involved with the races, doing excursions with Wide Open Adventures. So I got to see a lot of the peninsula that wasn't a part of the traditional race courses. But what are some of those areas where you got to dip your toe in the water and would like to go spend more time investigating and exploring?
Well, I'll tell you, the area north and south of Guerrero Negro, you know, Bahia Tortugas.
Yep.
Out in that area, we were trying to take the race course over that direction. Never were able to do it because of
It's a
sensitive
preserve.
area.
Yeah, that's a biosphere now.
Yeah, yeah. So, that was one area off the top of my head that I can remember. And then